Okay, it's time again for the Press Box Podcast. This is episode number 111, and today we're going to discuss the end of the college football season, the national championship game, and the two playoff games. We're going to discuss a little bit about that resolution of the season. We're also going to talk NFL football today. We're into the divisional round right now, 4 teams left at each conference. We're going to discuss the end of the season, the regular season, discuss the Super Wildcard Weekend games from last week, and then talk a little bit about the upcoming divisional games and what we think our predictions are for those games. Hey, make sure you join us on Twitter at PressBoxPod, on Instagram at PressBoxPod, and of course the PressBox Podcast channel on YouTube. So without further ado, episode 111 of the PressBox Podcast. Okay, welcome back to the Press Box Podcast. This is number 111, episode 111. For those of you counting at home, I'm your co-host, Ralph Miranda. I'll be joined by our producer, Nathan Miranda, shortly. Want to apologize. This is our first episode in, a little over a month. Things have been busy around our household, as you might expect, with the holidays, and we weren't able to actually put an episode down to tape, but we're going to get back into it. We have one going today. We're going to recap today the completion of the college football season. I think the last time we talked with you, we talked about the college football rankings, the playoff rankings. They were complete at that time, and we discussed what was upcoming. Obviously, everything's done now. We'll talk a little bit about that, as well as a little bit about the conclusion of the NFL season and where we're at in the playoff schedule for them. First, with college football. The last time we discussed college football with you, we had our playoff set. It was Alabama against Cincinnati. Alabama was ranked number 1. Cincinnati was ranked number 4. We had Michigan ranked number 2, hosting, if you can call it that, hosting Georgia number 3. Alabama and Cincinnati were squaring off in the Cotton Bowl. Georgia and Michigan in the Orange Bowl. Both those games went as expected. Alabama pretty much throttled Cincinnati 27-6. I think Alabama's running back had over 200 yards rushing. Alabama really didn't have much need to throw the football, and Cincinnati couldn't get much done on offense against the Alabama defense. Georgia, we build that game as a matchup of strength against strength. Michigan's strength was their running game, which they used to perfection to beat Ohio State in November. Georgia's strength was their defensive front seven, their ability to stop the run, and Georgia came out on top 34-11. Mainly because not only were they able to stop Michigan's run, but they were able to move the ball pretty effectively on Michigan, both through the air and on the ground, which was totally different than the struggle they had against Alabama in the SEC championship game. So that pretty much set up for us a national championship game of Georgia and Alabama, a rematch of the SEC championship game. Going into that game, I think Georgia was favored by 3, which was kind of interesting considering what Alabama had done to them just about a month before that. The game was played in Miami, Florida, the national championship game at Hard Rock Stadium down there. And it was a really, really good football game. Very close for a while. I think it was 9-6 at halftime, nothing but field goals. Both defenses were playing spectacularly. Alabama was able to creep ahead in the fourth quarter to go up 19-18. Excuse me, they went ahead 18 to 17, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I've got that wrong. But needless to say, it was pretty close. In fact, I can kind of check that for you real quickly here. It was 9-6 at halftime. At the end of the third quarter, it was 13-9 Georgia. And then I believe that Alabama went ahead 18-16. And then Georgia ended up scoring a couple touchdowns in the fourth quarter. One, an answer to the Alabama score, and then a pick six from the Georgia defense. Georgia scoring 20 points in the fourth quarter to win the game going away, 33-18. So, Nathan, we talked a lot about, during the season as we were doing these episodes on college football, we talked a lot about Georgia and how dominant they were. And then, of course, they ran up against Alabama in the SEC championship game and really looked like they had been exposed. But then they hammered Michigan, and they were able to hang with Alabama and play much better defense than they did in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, they did.
I guess let me ask it this way to you, being a defensive player, and I know you didn't have a lot of experience with losing football games badly to other teams, but when you lose a football game and the other team seems to be having success against you, does that give you any added incentive, or do you think that's an advantage to a defense, or do you just go ahead and prepare for that next matchup as if you were preparing all over again?
It's a good question. I guess I guess my initial thought is you just prepare like you'd prepare for them the first time you met him, right?
Okay, right.
But obviously something didn't work the first time.
Right.
So you have to take that into account. I mean, that sounds like more of a thing for a question for a defensive coordinator. How is he going to prepare?
Right.
What kind of plays they're going to run, what kind of style of defense they're going to have. As far as the players, I mean, I feel like it's the same, right? You watch game film, you study your opponent, you study the players, you study your keys on offense.
Right.
Which are going to be the same as before if it's the same team.
Right.
You try to maybe figure out if they did some new things against you the first time that you didn't see in film prior to the first game, you take that into account, and try to figure out kind of what you think they're going to try to do against you the second time. But I mean, you approach it the same way. I mean, you take the same things into account as you would any team you play. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that pretty much answers my question. Yeah.
What would you say to that?
No, I would agree with that. I think you hit it right on the head. I think that's a defensive coordinator question more than it is a player question. From the standpoint of the defensive coordinator decides what kind of game plan they're going to put together, and then they present it to the players, and the players go out there and prepare based on that. So, yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And I think Georgia, one thing I noticed they did a lot better in this game that they did not do in the first game, and again, it was a different strategy. They pressured the Alabama quarterback, Bryce Young, quite a bit. And in the first game in the SEC championship, it seemed like they were so worried about his ability to run the football that they kind of played more zone and more coverage. And when guys weren't open, he just took off and ran, and he really hurt them with his legs. I think this time they went back to their attacking style of defense and said, "Look, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us throwing the football and making completions." And they pressured him, they sacked him a few times, they hit him a few times, and I think their defensive backs played excellent coverage. I mean, I saw at 7 or 8 plays where their defensive backs were in excellent position and made great plays on receivers. So I think Georgia just played the style of defense in the national championship game that got them to a 12-0 season without really worrying much about what had happened in the SEC championship.
Well, how about this? Brings me to the possibility of what I said before. Is you think they were trying to? You think they realized that they didn't need to win the SEC championship game? And they didn't want to, and they realized they may have to face Alabama at some point. So they didn't want to show whoever they had to play after that. They didn't want to show too much to other teams.
Well, that could be. I mean, I don't know that we'll ever know that answer 100% because who's going to tell it to us, right?
Maybe not off the bat, but maybe once they got down a few scores or something, they realized like, hey, listen, we don't need to win this. We don't want to pull out all the stops.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility because I think they knew that Alabama was going to beat Cincinnati. And I think, or at least knew Alabama would probably beat whoever they played, and they felt confident enough that they would beat anybody else in the country. So yeah, that's very possible.
And not to mention, like let's say Alabama gave some trouble initially in that game, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe they say, well, if we correct it right here, and we still end up losing, have to face Alabama again, they'll know our correction. Whereas if we just keep doing what we're doing and we just continue to get beat and we lose the game, next time we'll make the correction. Alabama hasn't seen it before.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true, and I think. Yeah, I think you're right on that.
Maybe I'm underestimating the amount of pride teams take in being called the SEC champions. But as I said before, after the national championship game, Georgia's effectively the SEC champions.
Correct.
Because
they've beaten everybody.
Them and Alabama are 1-1 now, right? Alabama, but they have a better SEC record than Alabama.
Right.
Right. Alabama lost an SEC team, right? Or did they not?
They did. They lost to Texas A&M.
There you go. So effectively they are. I know they didn't win the SEC championship game, but I mean, they can kind of call themselves the SEC. They beat the SEC champion in the national championship game, so why does it matter?
Right. Well, anyway, it was a good football game. Very tight up until the last probably the last 5 minutes. I mean, Alabama, as I said, went up 18-13. Georgia took the ensuing kickoff, drove right down and scored, missed the 2-point conversion, so they were ahead 19-18. And then they scored again, and then they had a pick six, so it was 33-18 final score. But to your point, all that really matters to Georgia right now is Alabama may be wearing the SEC championship rings, but they'll be wearing the national championship rings, and have beaten the only team that was to beat them. So that obviously makes it very sweet for them. Let's recap a few of the scores in some of the other bigger bowls over the New Year's weekend. The Sugar Bowl saw Baylor beat Ole Miss 21-7. The Rose Bowl in a shootout type game. They had a receiver, I can't remember his name now, but I think he had 15 catches, over 300 yards receiving, and 4 touchdowns. So, or 3 or 4 touchdowns. So he had more than ever a monster game. In fact, I could probably get you his stats here really quickly, because it was. I've never seen a game like that before.
Yeah, it was
Smith Nijiba, or I don't know how to pronounce that, but
yeah, I'm not
15 catches, 347 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's pretty much phenomenal. And look at the quarterback. The quarterback, Stroud, threw for 37-46, 573 yards, 6 touchdown passes. And Utah had a similar showing. I mean, their quarterbacks threw for their quarterbacks only threw for about 235 yards, but they ran the ball very effectively. Had over 200 yards rushing. So it was a close game all the way through. But again, Ohio State was able to prevail on a field goal as time expired. Let's see. The other big bowl, we had the Gator Bowl, which was Wake Forest, the ACC champion, against Rutgers. That was an interesting game. Wake Forest, I believe, was supposed to play Texas A&M. Texas A&M backed out of the game because of citing COVID problems. Rutgers was recruited to play the game and soundly got thumped by Wake Forest. The Peach Bowl had Michigan State against Pittsburgh. Michigan State winning that one 31-21. I misspoke there. Wake Forest was not the ACC champion. Pittsburgh was the ACC champion, and they got beat by Michigan State 31-21. And then, of course, the Fiesta Bowl, Notre Dame, the debut of their new head coach, Marcus Freeman. Stellar first half, 21-14 lead by Notre Dame in the first half. Should have been 28-14 lead. Should have been 28-7. They allowed Oklahoma State to score a touchdown in the last minutes of that game, and then the second half was all Oklahoma State as they defeated Notre Dame 37-35. But I think Notre Dame's in good hands with their new coach. Their recruiting classes look good the next 2 years, and if they could put some key players in some key places, I think they're going to be a challenge for the playoff the next couple years. So that recaps the college football season for 2021. It ended like it has been ending most of our years, with an SEC team winning the national championship, Georgia winning their first national championship in 41 years. Their last time they won it was 1980 under the legendary coach Vince Dooley. So Georgia fans very happy, obviously, as they now could call themselves the national champion. So let's move on now to the National Football League. We want to talk a little bit about NFL football. We ended up last week with what the NFL was billing as the Super Wild Card Weekend. And for those of you who don't know, I think most of you do, starting last season, 2020, the NFL expanded their playoffs to 7 teams instead of 6 from each conference. So the way it used to work previously is with 6 teams, your 1 and 2 seeds got a bye, and then your 3, 4, 5, and 6 teams played the first weekend. This, with 7 teams, only the number 1 seed gets the bye, and 2 through 7 play. And then the 3 winners of those games go on to meet up with the number 1 seed for the divisional weekend. So this year, in the NFC, for example, the Green Bay Packers were the number 1 seed, so they finished. They had a bye last week. The Buccaneers were the number 2 seed. They hosted the 7 seed Philadelphia Eagles. The Dallas Cowboys were the number 3 seed. They hosted the number 6 seed, the San Francisco 49ers. And then on the first Monday night playoff game in history, the number 4 seed Los Angeles Rams, winners of the West, hosted their division rivals, the Arizona Cardinals. So we'll talk about the NFC first. I think, Nathan, you and I talked a little bit about this after these games were over. It was pretty obvious after this was over that the number 7 seeds really shouldn't have been in the playoffs. I mean, since we're talking about NFC, that would be the Eagles right now. I mean, they were manhandled by the Buccaneers.
Yeah, that's the most ridiculous thing they've done in a while. Is to add the extra playoff team in each conference. But we know why they did it. You know,
sure,
extra money and all that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, the Eagles had no business being in there. And then the AFC, of course, the Steelers had no business really being in there.
Right.
I mean, I think you're going to be seeing more blowouts in the Super Wildcard round year after year as long as they continue to have this extra playoff team.
I agree with you.
There's a reason in the past that these teams have missed the playoffs because they're not that great. You know what I mean? Like, it's just an obvious. It's obvious that the more you go down the final standings and the more you add more teams, that you're going to get worse and worse competition.
Right.
So
no, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what. I mean, the Eagles. Yeah, who do you think was a stronger team, really, the Eagles or the Steelers? It's hard to say.
I'd probably say the Steelers only because I think they had better personnel, but you know that's just my opinion. Yeah. You know, I mean, it certainly didn't look that way, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I agree with you there. I think we all know why they went to 7 teams. You know, they had a labor agreement that was coming up at the end of this year, but they solved it or settled it before the season started or right when the season started. And the way they were able to do that, you know, the players, one of the big hang-ups over the bargaining agreement that they hammered out 10 years ago was the players wanted a bigger percentage of the pie. Well, you know, the way they solved that problem is they just made the pie bigger. and they gave the players you know, maybe a little bit more of a percentage, not as much as they wanted, but with a bigger pie, you know, they're going to get more money. And the way you do that is add a 17th game, which they did this year, and then add another team to the playoffs, which they did in 2020. But it really does water down it waters it down. You know, you and I and Joseph have had this discussion before. The NFL was kind of the last bastion of a professional league that had a true playoff. In other words, you had to really work to get to the playoffs, you know. The NHL, the NBA, 8 teams get to the playoffs in each conference. I mean, that's almost the whole league. Yeah. So you really, and baseball's even gone that route now with all the wild card. Baseball used to be the best.
Didn't they add a team too recently?
They did.
I mean, within the last 10 years?
Yeah, they did. They've got 3 wild card teams now and 3 division winners from each league, which I think is ridiculous.
It's becoming more and more ridiculous. I mean,
well, listen, in baseball, I guess you could argue in baseball it's a little better because even if you're one of those wild card teams and you get through that 1-game playoff, you have a chance to beat another team because baseball is a different game. But football, I mean, you know, if you're 8-8 or 8-9, whatever it is, 9-8, there's a reason why you are. You know, like Bill Parcells said, you are what your record says you are. So if the Buccaneers are 13-4 and the Eagles are, you know, 8-9 or 9-8, I mean, the Buccaneers are a better football team. That's all there is to it. And they showed that with a 31-15 win, which really was, I believe, 31-0 or 24-0 at one point, and the Eagles scored some garbage touchdowns at the end of the game. But anyway, that was that game. The Cowboys and the 49ers was actually the best NFC game of the weekend. The Cowboys were the 3rd seed, winners of the Eastern Division, NFC East. The 49ers, which we talked about this early in the season, remember? Like through about week 3 or 4, we thought the NFC West, all 3 of those teams were going to make the playoffs, and that ended up happening. The 49ers might be one of the best teams out there. I mean, they finished strong with a big win over the Rams to get into the playoffs in week 18 of the season, their 17th game, coming back from a 17-0 deficit, and then have just, you know, kind of kept that momentum going here. They had a big lead over the Cowboys, 23-7, almost blew it. Cowboys had a chance to win the game late and they made way too many mistakes. The Cowboys, 14 penalties, couldn't run the ball for more than about 50 or 60 yards. Dak Prescott, who had thrown for a gazillion yards this year, could only manage about 230 yards passing. So pretty dismal performance by the Cowboys, but the 49ers looked to be pretty tough.
Yeah, and the 49ers should have had it won on that. They had a 4th and inches
Right.
And they jumped offside. Or they didn't have the guy wasn't set.
Wasn't
yet,
set.
They
Right.
had a punt. And the Cowboys, everybody's talking about that last play where Dak Prescott runs up the middle and slides, and then, you know, I see a lot of people talk about, like, you got to hand the ball to the ref. You know, he handed it to his center and stuff. Which, okay, I can understand that, but I go back to, why are you running that play?
Right.
And I know the coach, I guess it was a designed QB run,
It was, yeah.
And the coach, you could tell he was really defensive in the post-game press conference. I think he said something like, there was enough time on the clock to get another playoff. Like, as if to imply, like, the whole debacle with the ref and stuff is what ruined him, right? Did he say something like that? That there was enough time for another play, he thought?
Right.
Which, you could tell he was defensive about, so he knew what I think he had done. And that was a ridiculous play call.
Well, here's
the ball thing is some of it, handing the ball to the ref, but it's just ridiculous that you run that play to begin with.
Well, you know, look at it this way. You had 14 seconds on the clock, okay? The 49ers, if you watched it, they were playing, they had the sidelines protected. They were rushing 4 guys. They had 2 guys on each sideline, okay? And then they had 3 guys deep on the end zone line, okay? So obviously they were not going to let you complete a pass to the outside, and they were trying not to let you throw it deep. They were going to give you the middle of the field, obviously, right? Because there was no timeouts. So I don't have as much of a problem with the call as I do with Dak Prescott. In other words, you have to realize, instead of running for 15 yards, run for 7 or 8. Get down. If you'd have done that, I think you would have had time to get up there and spike it and take one last shot at the end zone, number 1. 2, to go along with your point, you were at the 34-yard line, throw it into the end zone right there, okay? Or just try to go for it right there. I mean, I know they wanted a few more yards, but come on, you can score from that distance just as easily as you can from 20.
I think the coach addressed that too. Something like, you want to throw a Hail Mary from the 40 something, you want something. I was like, come on. I mean, like you said, an extra 10, 15 yards is not going to make that big of a difference.
No.
And okay, yeah, I mentioned that too, I think, earlier, or we talked about that earlier, that Prescott, he should have just kept running until he couldn't run anymore. I mean, the defense would love that.
Yeah, he might as well, yeah.
He should have slid after. They should have told him, or he should have known in his head, okay, get 10 yards, slide, because that's all I have. But to your point too, they're giving you the middle of the field like that. Why not just run like a quick slant or some type of end right over the middle? That way you get about the same number of yards and it's quicker, right? And then you just spike it instead of have the QB run it. I don't know, it's just weird all around.
Right. I don't understand it either. I mean, I don't understand it. I think the Cowboys are just and again, to go back to what we talked about before, you know, you can't really blame the game on that last play as much as you can.
No.
The Cowboys played a poor game. 14 penalties. You know, a couple turnovers. Dak Prescott threw a bad interception. The 49ers were up 16-7. He threw a bad interception. 49ers got it on the Cowboy 30 and scored. You know, so there was a lot of things going in that game. But I still think the 49ers are a very physical football team. They have to go into Green Bay this week. It's going to be tough. Lambeau Field, the frozen tundra, cold, Aaron Rodgers. But I think if anybody can do it, it's them. And the reason is they remind me of the Giants from about 10 years ago. They can pressure the quarterback and get sacks with 4 guys, with their front 4, okay? And when you do that, you can drop 7 guys into coverage, which makes it a lot harder for the quarterback to find open receivers, and it makes it a lot easier for you to negate a quarterback like a Rodgers or a Brady. If you blitz them, they know exactly where they're going with the ball. They know exactly how much time they've got. It's very hard to blitz guys like that because they're so smart and they're such good quarterbacks. So we'll see.
Do you think, I've heard some talk of this, kind of, do you think they get rid of Mike McCarthy, the Cowboys?
Yeah, there's been talk. I don't think they're going to get rid of him this year.
I think one of the Joneses might have even said that it's not going to happen.
No, I mean, it'd be a mistake. I think it'd be a mistake. I mean, not right now.
He did make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, if he goes 9-8 next year, or this happens again, maybe. But again, I don't think you can blame him right now. Now, the other NFC game, the Rams and the Cardinals on Monday night, blowout. I mean, the Rams took a 21. Really, the turning point. I say turning point. The end of that game was the Rams were up 14-0. They had the Cardinals pinned on their own 2-yard line. Kyler Murray drops back to pass. The Rams pressure him. Guy gets on him around the waist. He's going to go down for a safety. Kyler Murray just flings the ball up in the air. I don't know what he was thinking, but he just throws it up in the air, like trying to get it out of bounds. Ram guy intercepts it at the 3-yard line and runs in for the touchdown, and that was it. It was 21-0, and they cruised on to a 34-11 win.
I think I saw it was the shortest pick six in playoff history or something.
Yeah, I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, Matthew Stafford was as good as advertised. And I'll tell you something that a lot of people. Odell Beckham had a great game. All right, if Odell Beckham plays like he did Monday night, the next few weeks, the Rams have a good chance to get to the Super Bowl.
Especially since the Bucks lost their kind of number one guy in Antonio Brown.
Yes. The Bucks are really hurting at wide receiver, and I think that's going to hurt them a lot when they get deeper. If they have to play, I think the Bucks will win. Let me just.
I guess he's not the number one. I guess what's his name, Evans is, but one of their top guys.
All right, then let's look at the AFC real quick. You alluded to the fact. I think you were talking a little bit about the Steelers not being. Yeah, the Steelers ended up getting hammered pretty well, 42-21 by the Chiefs. The only really meaningful score the Steelers got was they sacked Mahomes. He fumbled the ball on his own 20, and T.J. Watt or whatever J is ran into the end zone, and they were up 7-0. And after that, the Chiefs I think scored 35 unanswered points to go up 35-7. I want to talk a little bit. We talked a little bit about this before, but the interesting reason why the Steelers got into the playoffs. Going into the last week of the season, for the Steelers to get into the playoffs, well, let me step back. The Patriots had already secured a playoff spot, so there were 2 wild card spots left. The Colts were eliminated by virtue of their stunning loss to the Jaguars. Otherwise, they would have been in one of those spots, and I think that would have eliminated the Steelers because the Chargers and the Raiders played on Sunday night for that other playoff spot. So had the Colts taken care of business, they would have eliminated Pittsburgh. But the Colts lost. So now you've got 2 spots available. So the winner of the Chargers-Raiders game had one of those spots. For Pittsburgh to get in, they had to beat the Ravens, and the Chargers-Raiders game had to at least not end in a tie. Had it ended in a tie, the Chargers and the Raiders would have made the playoffs, and the Steelers would have been out. So going into that, the Colts lose, the Steelers beat the Ravens, so now they sit back and wait for the Charger-Raider game. And wouldn't you know that game came down to a final kick as time expired in overtime to avoid a tie. I mean, it would have been a script that I don't think you could have written if you wanted to, and you're a movie guy. I mean, it was a weird game, but and it almost ended in a tie.
What's the deal too that looked like if you look at one of the Raiders players looks like he told one of the Chargers players at the end of the game that they were taking a knee, before the Chargers called that timeout. And
right.
Somewhere else, I think that was referenced. I think Carr maybe said that
they were
David
considering.
Carr,
yeah.
Was it Derek?
Derek Carr.
Derek Carr. That they were considering that they would change their game plan or something. I don't know.
Well, it did. I think it did for a couple reasons. I don't remember the exact yard lines, but I know the timeout that the Chargers called allowed the Raiders to run another play. And that play picked up 8 yards, which gave them a legitimate chance at a field goal. I think it was a 47-yard field goal. So the thinking there is, and we talked about this too, the thinking there is, okay, let's try for the win. If he misses it, we tie, we go to the playoffs. And being 47 yards, his leg was strong enough where if he missed it, it was going to be a miss that went out of the back of the end zone. If you try a 55-yard field goal, right, the Chargers can put a guy back there to return a missed kick. And now if your kick doesn't get there, the Chargers could actually return it and win, and you lose.
And I don't understand a whole lot about kicking, but as I understand, the farther back you go, he has to kick it more on a
lower angle,
lower trajectory. So
right.
There's more of a chance of a block, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. So it's possible that timeout allowed the Raiders to get within a range where they could at least try a field goal. Whether they made it or not, they didn't care because they were going either way. So it was interesting, and the Steelers ended up getting the playoffs and getting hammered by the Chiefs, and then of course the Raiders, by virtue of that kick, made the playoffs as well. The Chiefs were the Chiefs. They started out a little slow, like they seem to be this year, but Kelsey had a great game, scored a touchdown. Mahomes was excellent as usual, and the Chiefs move on. The other game was the other blowout game was the Bills and the Patriots. That was a surprising game to me. The Bills had lost to the Patriots in Buffalo late in the season when the Patriots only threw 3 passes and ran the ball for, I think, close to 300 yards. But the Bills' defense played phenomenal in that football game Saturday night. I mean, they just pounded the Patriots. I mean, it was 30-0 or 33-0 before the Patriots even kicked a field goal. And I think the Bills became the first team in some time that scored on all of their first half possessions. They didn't miss a beat. Playoffs, in the playoffs, yeah. They were good. I mean, their defense was awesome. Running game, Josh Allen running, throwing. I think if the Bills play like that, they're going to be hard to beat, as you go forward. And then the other game, the Raiders and the Bengals, was probably one of the better games of the day. The Bengals had the lead most of that game. The Raiders stayed close most of the game. The Bengals had a chance leading 26-19 to run out the clock. Couldn't do it. Had to kick it back to the Raiders. Raiders got it with about a minute. I want to say about a minute 40 left. Drove it all the way down. Ended up throwing an interception on fourth down at the goal line to end that football game and prevent the Raiders from a chance to tie it, which would have sent it to overtime. So that brings us to the divisional round of the playoffs, which will be this weekend. The Cincinnati Bengals, who, as I said, were I think they were the third seed, if I'm not mistaken. They will play now the number one seed, the Tennessee Titans. So it'll be Bengals at Titans Saturday at 4:30. It'll be Packers and 49ers. 49ers the 6th seed. Packers the 1 seed, the NFC.
Did I hear correctly, too, that Garoppolo's never thrown a professional pass in temperatures lower than 40 degrees?
I haven't heard that, but it's probably true. Yeah, probably true. Packers 49ers Saturday night at 8:15. Then on Sunday, the Rams, who are the 4th seed, will play at Tampa Bay. That should be a really good football game right there. I'm looking forward to that one on Sunday at 3. And then the Bills and the Chiefs, which is a rematch of last year's AFC Championship game, which will be in Kansas City at 6:30 on Sunday night. So, Nathan, looking at those games, if you had to guess right now or pick right now, who do you think will advance to the conference championship games?
Is Derrick Henry playing?
Derrick Henry is playing. Yes, he is.
I say Titans, Packers, Buccaneers, and Chiefs.
Okay. So you think it's going to be Titans and Chiefs, a rematch of 2 years ago's NFC Championship game, or AFC Championship game in Tennessee this year, though, if that happens. And then Packers and Buccaneers, a rematch of last year's NFC Championship game, again in Green Bay. Yeah, I look at it maybe a little bit different. I think Derrick Henry obviously is the key there. I think the Bengals are going to win that game. I just have that feeling.
The Bengals seem like a better overall team, but I think Derrick Henry could push them over the top. Plus, I think Joe Burrow, I think, is great. He's going to continue to improve, but I just don't see him getting to an AFC Championship game or a Super Bowl this quickly. I feel like in his career. I feel like he's made another step now.
Right.
Well, he basically didn't play much last year.
Right.
So this is kind of like his rookie year, kind of, right? Full season.
Right.
He's made a huge step. I just think it's going to take a few more years, just like Josh Allen. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Again, I said I think they're going to probably lose, but I can see the Bills making the Super Bowl more so than I could the Bengals. You know, because I feel like it takes a few steps for a young quarterback to get to the top.
I agree with you, and the Bills are in that progression right now, right? Playoffs, AFC Championship game. Where do they go this year? Right.
I just think Kansas City's That's the biggest game of all the ones I think that I don't really know right now. I said Chiefs, but the Chiefs are not that great. I don't think
they are either. No.
I'm going to say Bills. I'm going to switch and say Bills.
Okay. All right. So you say Bills, Titans, and Buccaneers, Packers. Yeah. I'm going to go Bengals, Bills, and I'm going to go Rams and Packers. So I think the Rams have a chance to upset Tampa Bay, given their makeup right now. I think the Bills have learned a lot over the last couple of years, especially last year. If they play anywhere near they played against New England, I think they're going to win.
Yeah, the more I think about that one, I said Bills.
And then I think the Packers, 49ers, as much as I think 49ers have the team to beat Green Bay, it's going to be hard to do it in that weather.
If this game is in San Francisco, I might pick the Packers.
I agree with that.
49ers.
I agree with that. And I think I'm picking the Bengals. Again, I agree with you. If Derrick Henry is 100% and the Titans get a lead, the Bengals defense is going to get a steady dose of Derrick Henry, and that is going to be awful tough. So we'll see. It should be an interesting weekend, a really great weekend of NFL football. I think one of the best weekends of the year when you get down to these final 4 teams in each conference.
This could be the best weekend in the year, really, because the wild card weekend you have more games, but some of the games are dog games.
Yes.
And then the conference championship, it's to go to the Super Bowl, was only 2 games.
Right.
So the wild card, you get 4 games, all of them are pretty solid games.
Right. I agree with that. So it'll be interesting. So that's going to be our show here at episode number 111, our wrap up of the college football season and our close to wrap up of the NFL football season. We'll get with you again next week to talk a little bit about our conference championship matchups, analyze the 4 games that we just discussed, and talk a little bit about the matchups going forward with the chance to go to the Super Bowl on the line next week. So that's episode 111. Remember to join us on Twitter at PressBoxPod. We look for your input. We look for your voice. What do you think about some of the things we've been discussing? On Instagram at PressBoxPod, and then, of course, the PressBox Podcast channel on YouTube, where you can ask us a bunch of questions, listen and watch a bunch of clips, and follow us completely through social media and all of those through networks. So for Nathan, I'm Ralph. We've enjoyed being with you, and we'll see you next time on the PressBox Podcast.